that people probably would have not thought it was cool if we called the demo Kentucky Straight Edge. That just for some reason that just doesn't sound nearly as cool. So I'm
They're not drinking, they're not smoking, and that's totally cool, but they can totally enjoy the bands, get in the pit, and the best thing is not throw up on people.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure Podcast. We go from the Western Canada bracket to the Midwest bracket of the States, and we're going to be talking with the man, the myth, the legend, the Rumble from Down Under on the bass side, Caleb Murphy from Inclination. Thanks for coming on the show, my guy. Sorry, you froze.
Yeah, man. Good to be here.
As soon as I was introing you, I was like, "Oh, was that intro not good enough?" I don't know.
It's all good. The audio chopped out a little bit too, but I think it's okay.
Yeah. Caleb, I've been starting these episodes a little bit with the why about why I'm having this person on the show, and you're not the first Inclination focused podcast that I've done. You know, we've done an episode with Isaac, we've done an episode with Tyler, and I think since when I had Tyler on, which was, I can't even remember, it was like maybe 150. We're in like the 180 bracket at this point. It was just before the two new songs dropped, and it was just immediately like, okay, I need to have another one. But I think an extra reason of doing this podcast is Tyler reached out about the LDB Records comp that he's been working on. And, so it's a little bit of a tease because it will be played at the very end of this episode. But the Inclination song from that comp will be played at the end. I'm sure we're going to be chatting about that. But, I'm sure a lot of people might be skipping to the end of the episode just to listen to that. But the real ones stay here, listen to the full chat, and then we're going to be listening to that. But yeah, I've been a big fan of yours for a long ass time through all the other projects that you've been in. I know that some of the other bands have come through Western Canada and played a bunch of shows, and just been, kind of just always on my mind of like having you as someone on the guest, to be a guest on the show. And here we are. So I really appreciate you making some time for us today.
Yeah, man. It's a pleasure. Happy to be here. I appreciate it.
So, yeah, of course. Before we get into the music chats, we have to check some bevs. So it's tradition for the guests to go first. So tell me what you're going to be sipping on throughout the episode.
So I live in Lexington, Kentucky. It's not Louisville. It's more central Kentucky. And I have what is affectionately referred to as Winchester Creek water. It is a soda called Ale8. It is manufactured and bottled in Winchester, Kentucky.
Okay.
It is... it's like a citrusy ginger soda that's also caffeinated, and it's delicious. It's best out of the glass bottle. It's the way to go.
Yeah.
And it's delicious. So
yeah,
I need some caffeine. Been a long day.
Yeah. And I have to give props to any guest that comes on the podcast that doesn't have the bev cracked and they've already taken a bunch of sips. You were like, I have it ready to go, so we're getting official that.
I thought about it because there's a whole sixer in the fridge, but I figured I'd wait to do it officially.
Yeah. Is it one of those twist tops, or you have to have like a bottle opener of some kind? Or are you going to just bite it off? I don't know.
Just like, no, it twists off, thankfully. I don't have a bottle opener.
Yeah. That's always like the one thing. It's like sometimes if it's a soda or anything else, you're just like, oh, this is not a twist, and I'm out in the wilderness or whatever. So, no, that's a good point. I'm big on the branding of that bottle. I feel like it's very on point and calculated. So that's sick. I am drinking, I'm sure you can probably see a number of the Liquid Death that is sitting behind me. So I'm going to be drinking one of those today. It's just straight up tap water. It was very funny because just before this, I had for my younger pup. We had like her first session of like doggy training. And on the email, it was like, oh yeah, bring, some water for your dog. And I'm so used to like, if I need to like just have water on the go versus I have to put it in a Tupperware and then screw it and then it's leaking. I'm like, oh, just bring the liquid death with me. But then I get to the class, I'm like, I feel the eyes of like, are you drinking a beer at this doggy training session? And I'm like, no, this is just water. And I like open it up and I'm like pouring it out for her. And then the instructor stops mid like, teaching. She's like, oh, that's water. It's like, all right. There's a lot of people within the music world that know about this and the brand and all that kind of stuff. But, I always forget that normies just see this and think it's a giant Modelo that I'm just like, I'm just drinking, feeding this to my dog.
It's a fair assumption based on looks. I haven't, I've had the normal one, but I haven't had any of the sparkling ones yet. I need to find those somewhere and house them for their good.
Yeah. It was so funny when they started the flavored sparkling ones. I got like pinged so many times being like, have you had this? Have you had this? But it hasn't hit Canada yet. And I was in California for work at the beginning of March, couldn't find it. I didn't have as much time to look high and low for it. And then when I was in California this last trip, it was like my mission, like any off time I had to like hit every 7-Eleven that I could. And I luckily was able to try all the 3 flavors. So I'm up to speed on the liquid death.
What's the ranking on the 3 flavors? What do you got?
Okay. So for the folks at home that don't know, there's severed lime, chainsaw mango, and berried alive. So it's like a mixed berry kind of thing. I think the severed lime is the top one. Mixed berry is second and mango is third. And I might catch some heat for this because a lot of people have very differing opinions on it, but I think severed lime takes the cake because I think lime is the safest sparkling water flavor. I feel like it's the easiest to get right.
I think anything citrusy is probably pretty safe, really, as far as that goes.
Yeah. So that would be my ranking. So if you are on the hunt later this weekend or, sometime in the future listening to this, you'd be like, that would be the one to go after. To be fair, the severed lime was the hardest to find. It was the last of the 3 that I was able to locate.
It would be my first choice too. That'd be the first one I'd try.
Well, I'm going to crack
cracking
this.
Them open?
Yes.
All right.
In sync. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Oh, yours looked way cooler. It was just cheers to you, my guy. Okay, well, we've talked bevs for the first, at least 5 minutes of this podcast, so now we can move on to some of the music chats. Sometimes I'm always like,
let's get down to it.
Is this too punishing for anyone that's like doesn't like beverage?
I mean, I think anyone that knows me knows I'm a beverage enthusiast. I'm always on the hunt for like what's good, and I want to try new stuff all the time. So this is I'm into it. I like it. I think it's a good opener.
Yeah. Oh, it unintentionally is like the nice icebreaker of this show, and it didn't start that way. It was like, oh, I'll just have this in a way that I can combine these passions of mine. But it's nice to be able to like learn about Isaac's like love of hot chocolate and how he feels like,
oh, he loves it. He's an ab dude. He's an absolute fiend. So there's I can't remember if I've taken Isaac here or not, but there's a place in town here in Lexington. It's called the Chocolate Holler. And they only make hot chocolate. They do like these crazy flavors. They do it hot or iced. They have a bunch of
iced
vegan
hot
ones.
chocolate is so dope.
Dude, it's I can't remember if I've taken there or not, and shame on me if I haven't, but it's pretty great.
This is why I'm really glad that I have Jordan cutting between, because I have to check this because we're on this topic. Calgary, because I know you guys are going to be playing here for Wild Rose.
Yes,
Calgary
sir.
has Hot Chocolate Fest, and I can't remember when it happens. Oh, it happens in February, but there's a whole month dedicated to like hot chocolate. And it's like all these different coffee shops and different places will just do all these different things. So maybe there needs to be a one-off show just so Isaac can just dabble with all the hot chocolates here.
He would freak out, but I'm not going to lie, man. I do not want to come to Calgary in February.
Yes, respectfully, that's enough.
I've done it. I don't ever need to do it again. So
yeah, it's always funny when I'm telling bands like, we want you to come and tour Western Canada. Just don't come from like October to March, you know.
Unless you're like, I could probably fill a podcast about Western Canada tour stories. To be honest with you. But yeah,
we'll definitely carve out a space for that on this
it's
one.
It's a time.
So Caleb, before we get into some of the nicher things, I always ask any new guest who comes on the show a little bit about how they got their start in hardcore, or what their origin story is. I know that some people like to give the really condensed version. Some people give like the giant medieval scroll version. So whatever side of the coin that you fall on, as far as how in depth you want to go. But just take me back in time to when you were first finding out about all this shit.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can probably keep it pretty short and sweet. So I graduated high school in, wow, this is going to date me, 2006. And I lived around Kansas City, Missouri. I moved to Columbia, Missouri to attend for college. And how do I put this delicately? I really sucked at it. I didn't really apply myself at all. So I ended up just kind of like, I met some guys who worked at and owned a tattoo shop in Columbia, Missouri. And I had been, I listened to like punk music and, things like that. Like I'd been to Warped Tour when I was a kid. And like, that's when like Warped Tour was cool. It was like NoFX and like Anti-Flag and stuff like that. So it was actually, a good introduction to kind of like more mainstream, like punk rock. So like that was kind of my initial in, but then, I met these guys and like, two of them are brothers and have like the Blood for Blood skull tattooed on their hands. And so I had, it's like that. So I had a kind of a crappy, like hand me down bass guitar from my aunt. And, they needed somebody to they needed a bass player. And I kind of had a musical background. So, I started doing that, and I just kind of like, if I wasn't dropping out of college before, I definitely was now. So
that was the catalyst.
And it started out like, it was mainly like kind of like, because hardcore back then had a lot more kind of like punk rock influence in a lot of ways. But this was around the time when like those smaller towns, like not like big cities in the States, but like smaller towns of like, 100,000 people, would get like crazy shows come through, and they were always really, really wild. So we started booking bands, in town, and, we started going on tours. And I think my first tour was only, a couple days long, but there were 3 bands packed in one van, no trailer, all the gear, like everyone, like people sitting on the floor. Like, and back then, the best part is there was no, like, if you wanted to use GPS on your phone, like, good luck. You weren't going to
pull out the big old map.
Oh,
and
man.
You're like, I think we're around here.
We would go to like a FedEx or I guess it was Kinko's back then. It wasn't even FedEx. And we would print off MapQuest directions to the next show. So, and all these guys were like, probably like 5 or 6 years older than me. So that was kind of my in. We played shows around the Midwest, and I met a lot of people who I'm still friends with today, including Tyler. Like I've known Tyler for, probably 15 years now. And like, I met him on, one of the very first, like, tours I ever did. So it was like that. It was like that for a lot of people in the Midwest. Like we all knew each other, even though we all lived like 6 or 8 hours away, because we would drive to shows, because we, not as many bands would come through.
Right.
And so those friendships eventually just blossomed into like doing more and more bands. And I never really looked back. I really found a place where I felt like I belonged, because I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel right doing like the, graduate high school, go to college thing. That pipeline at that point wasn't for me. And, I think it definitely like really, it's still a huge part of my life. I don't really know who I'd be without it.
Totally. And yeah, I think a lot of people can relate, like myself included, of like always being in those like forced social situations, whether it's like high school or like post-secondary, or even just like the social things within that, whether it's like going to like a party or things like that. And for myself, like I always felt like I feel like I would need to change drastically to actually have some level of enjoyment, and I don't want to do that because like I have this sense of identity with like, this music, but like, it's two-sided. I'm not expecting these people to like, I'm showing them this music, and some people are either having this really adverse reaction, like I went to like a Christian high schools growing up, and everyone's like, what is this Satan music? And I'm like, this is a band off of Face Down, so they're actually talking about Jesus and all that kind of stuff. But so either having a super adverse reaction or people who could tolerate it, but they just didn't get it. And I think up until going to, any kind of local show and just feeling that energy and that sense of community is like what kind of was like, I don't know. I would probably be a lesser version of myself if I bended and just didn't discover that. It's kind of like a saving grace, kind of be like, oh no, it's okay to feel the way that you do and have the interest that you do as well.
Right. I think let me talk about two, and I don't need to go in depth about them. There were two shows that weren't just like local shows that were very like formative for me to kind of like cement that like this is what I like, to cement like how much I loved it. I couldn't remember the year if you put a gun to my head, but I'm going to say 2005, 2006. The old El Torreon in Kansas City, Missouri was Comeback Kid and Champion. Are we frozen?
Oh no, we're okay. Now you're frozen on my end.
For a second. And then also at the old El Torreon in Kansas City was the first time I saw Madball, and they were on a Ferret Records tour when they were on Ferret with a band called Undermined. So those were two very like, I'll never forget, like in Kansas City, this like neo-Nazi dude like got on stage during the Madball set. And this is when like Madball, I think they were touring like with security pretty much. And I just, this dude gets on stage and like, it's like Sig Heils and just gets the shit kicked out of him in front of the entire room full of people by Madball security. And that was kind of just like, okay, like I'm in, like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the first really formative show. Did you say that there was a second one as well?
Those are two separate shows.
Oh, those are two separate shows. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. It was Champion and Comeback Kid were on tour. And then I can't remember what year that Madball show was, but those were the two shows that really just kind of like, those will always stick in my brain. It's like it wasn't just like a dinky, like local show at a VFW hall, which don't get me wrong, those are great, but like this was my first time seeing like bands like on that level.
Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking back to like, you kind of can't anticipate like what that show moment is for someone else. Cause like there's people new and old who have come on this podcast where they're like, Have Heart's initial last show was like the thing that really like opened my eyes and like wanted me to get into this, to like fast forwarding to like when they reunited, like there's been bands and people that have gotten into hardcore because they went to those shows because it was such a big deal. So I think it's like really cool when it, whether it's like a band's last show, a reunion show, a fest, like in even as small as just a local show, like that could be the original, like, planting of seeds, to put it that way, just of like, you never know. And I think like showing up and, whether you're the band playing or the person putting on the show, like always bring it, not devaluing it. It's like, oh, it's just like a Wednesday night whatever show with a bunch of, you know, people that I know. It's like you never know that there could be one kid in the room that's discovering that for the first time who becomes the next Scott Vogel 20 years later. You never know.
Yeah, that's true, and it's really just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that that's the path my life took. Like I would be a completely different person if I hadn't found this. So yeah.
Right. You mentioned a little earlier as far as like, you know, I don't know if you were playing bass out of necessity kind of at the beginning, but yeah, that was one of my first questions was like, were you always like a bass player, or were you like, you know, because I think a lot of hardcore bands are like, I play bass because, you know, the guitar position was already filled. So I was kind of curious, like, were you always just rocking 4 strings, or did you want to do, you know, a full 6 string kind of setup?
I mean, I picked up both when I was probably like 15 or 16. I have a younger brother we're pretty close in age. He's only like 15 months younger than me. So like we kind of grew up doing the same things at the same time. And he was just a much better guitar player than I was. So I was just kind of like, okay, well that's his thing. So I'm going to make the bass guitar my thing.
Got you. Okay.
So and to your point, like, a lot of hardcore bands do just kind of have like, hey man, we need a bass player. Like, you want to do it? And then it's just like their friend who, either like just wasn't a very good guitar player or just wants to be in a band. But, no, I love playing bass. I like playing bass when you like kind of like get in the pocket with the drummer and like you feel like that vibe is such like a cool feeling. And also like might be kind of rough, but like a lot of people who play bass in hardcore bands stink. Like they're bad at it. And their bass gear sounds like shit. And it makes me just kind of like, you dude, like, can you just do a little bit better?
Yeah. It's pretty funny because it's like, I think a lot of people joke that hardcore is the best genre of music for shitty musicians at times, because you don't have to be a phenomenal guitar player to play in, you know, a youth crew band or anything like that. But when you are a really good musician,
have you seen how fast those dudes' hands move? Come on, that right hand is crazy.
Yeah. But I think that there's a lot. I think the excess, you know, I'm talking a little smack, but I think what's really, really great about that on the more optimistic side of things is like hardcore punk, you know, any kind of heavy music. Most brands of heavy music are very accessible, whether you're like, you have 6 months of experience playing guitar or bass versus like 6 years. So, you know, obviously like, you know, most people like, there's so many scenarios in big or small where it's like, oh, like this person just joined the band and then they were learning how to play that instrument while they were like Malachi from Scal was like a great example. He's like just sang and then he wanted to start a band with Kat and he was like, I don't know how to play guitar. I'm just going to figure it out. And now they're like one of the most talked about bands, going on tour with Limp Bizkit in a couple weeks. So I think,
man, that's such a crazy thing. That's like, I saw that and just like, all right, that's so wild.
I think that's like top 3 craziest tours of this year, and this year isn't even half over. Like, I think it's just looking at the poster, I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me.
It's too weird. It's too weird to happen. It's like this like weird, like it like came from this weird bizarro world where Limp Bizkit takes like hardcore bands on tour. So, oh, that rocks. That's great for that band.
Yeah, I also think the lore as far as like, I think Limp Bizkit was like talking about them on like a YouTube like they commented on a music video of theirs from their like YouTube channel.
It came
and
about,
that's what kind of started.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to interview any members of Limp Bizkit on the podcast, you know, knock on wood. That would be sick. But that would be one of my first initial questions. Like, so which came first? How did you discover this band? But jumping back to
how did we get here?
Yeah. Fred, I have questions. So going back to the bass side of things. So it was almost like there was a little bit of interest on the guitar, but since your brother was already doing it, you were like, well, I have to, carve my own lane and do my own thing. So I'm going to do this. And you're clearly passionate about like, yeah, there's some people that are doing this role of the band and they're kind of either doing it half-assed or they're not taking it as seriously. So I think that there's a couple things there that we can hit on. So, maybe before we get into that, you also mentioned gear as like kind of being like a crucial, like, are you a gear nerd when it comes to bass stuff, or are you kind of like mid? Like, where do you fall on like the super nerdy to like I don't give a fuck level?
I'm definitely nowhere close to the I don't give a fuck level. I'm very particular about what I use. I have a, and every member of every band I've ever been in has always hated it because I always have a big, giant, heavy, full tube bass amp that is miserable to carry and miserable to pack up and miserable to lug around. But nothing touches it. Nothing gets close to that sound. I'm also like a serial like adjuster as far as like trying to get tone right. I'm very critical of my own tone. I always want it to be a certain way in my head, and when it's not, it's like a mental block that I can't get past. So
yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily like call myself like a gear nerd. I know what I like, and I don't really stray from it much.
Sure.
Every once in a while, I'll like experiment with some other pedals. And some of that's really, really worked out. I don't have like this giant pedal board. But I do usually run like a pretty like overdriven and distorted bass tone. And I think from a lot of years spent playing in a band that only had one guitar player, I really had to like fill a lot more than I would have had to if it was a 5-piece band. So I really like. I think that it's important to, if you're a bass player in a hardcore band, to like own it and make it cool and listen, pay attention to the records that you like, where you think the bass tone is really cool, and like try to emulate that or make your own thing. But just own it. Playing bass is awesome. It's a lot more fun. There's way less to worry about a lot of times.
Yeah, I've gotten to play bass in a couple projects, and I don't think that I've had more fun with just like the level of like, oh, I don't have to really like, I have to focus on one string versus like a combination of three because I'm doing a power chord or things like that.
Unless you're an Inclination, then half the songs are bass chords, and it's not. There's a lot more. More.
Bass power chords are definitely in my opinion, an underutilized aspect in hardcore. But that's
sure.
That's getting a little bit more on that nerdy side. I love that you said that you have a very heavy like tube head. That's like kind of it's like, all right, who's gonna help me do this? Because when I think of just bass gear in general, it's always like the fridge, the 810. That's like, oh, we have to. It's the community effort to move this, but it's like that plus the crazy head.
And what sucks is I think inside the road case, my head weighs almost as much as an 810. It's not
serious.
Man. It's not far off. I think in the case, my head is like 120 pounds. It's pretty brutal. Shout out to Tyler and Peter for always being down to help me move it around. Good thing we only play like 8 shows a year. They'd probably kill me.
Yeah, if Inclination was the full-time touring band that I think a lot of people are like, oh, that would be sick. It's like, well, the gear is pretty heavy, so there might be.
I'm too old to lug that thing around every night now.
Dude, I used to be very like. There was a stage for me where I was a gear nerd because I was working at a guitar store or like a local music store. So it was like always trying out different things and like swapping things out. Always cared about how it looked. As soon as I had like a road case and I had to ask people, like I think my bass player who is he's 10 years older than me, so he was kind of like the actual dad of the band, and he kind of sat me down. He's like, "Bro, I know that you're stoked on all this gear shit, but like, you need to be able to like do this shit yourself and not just be like, all right, who's helping me?" Like,
yeah,
it was just one of those. It was a good lesson. Unless it's like needed, then you know, I was just like, it looks cool beside the cab.
I can lug it around by myself, but like getting that thing like up to chest level and then putting it on top of an A10, I should not do that if I want to like walk the next day.
Right.
So it's pretty rough, but it's, you know, I think anyone and that I've ever like had the pleasure of playing in a band with will agree that it's worth it.
Oh, totally.
I try to bring something to the table that you know, at least tone wise, that seem that, you know, isn't super typical.
Yeah. And kind of circling back to another thing you said, as far as like when you can get like it dialed in with your drummer, as far as like doing those like bass only kind of sections where it's like super punchy and it's just like super syncopated. It really reminds me of when Kevin from Knocked Loose was on the podcast and talking about his kind of connection to PacSun when they're doing Knocked stuff. And it's like, it's just so apparent when it's like, it's not like, oh yeah, just kind of strum whatever, versus like, no, we're like the kicks and, you know, the strumming is like super on point.
You feel it. And like, I've never, anytime I've ever played a stage that has monitors, I don't want to hear anything but kick, drum, and snare. I don't need guitar. I don't need myself. I definitely don't need vocals. For me, it's just, I need kick and snare, because that's the basis for the kind of music we play. That's it. That's what starts it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I never thought that I would learn someone's preference of like what they need in their monitor from a show through this podcast, but I love that.
I mean,
like,
you know, I mean, it is what it is. I just kick snare. That's all I need. Give me a lot of kick and snare.
Yeah. It really is super individual, because like, you know, as someone that films shows, you know, I'm on stage as the band is like about to play, because I want to catch that first initial moment right to the end. And so it's like learning I need all vocal, like certain drummers and certain bands would be like, I need all vocals and no guitar. And then some person's like, oh, I need the other guitar player. So yeah, that's cool. So like I mentioned at the top of the episode, Caleb, I've had, you know, Tyler and Isaac on the show to talk about how Inclination kind of started. But I do want to kind of hear your entry point into that through your lens as well. Talk to me about like the origin of like when you first either learned about that, or like, you know, because I think there was definitely a gap of time from when I was seeing you playing a lot of shows and just in different bands. And then so I was like, oh, Caleb's in this band, and it got me excited again. So tell me about like the start and how that kind of hit your radar.
Yeah, for sure. So my old band that we can talk about or not talk about, or it's not an off limit topic. It is what it is. We were on tour. We brought Knocked Loose on tour in Europe with us. And in Europe, a lot of the times you show up to shows like, you know, 8 hours early. And you can generally get into the venues pretty early too. So I think Isaac and I were just kind of like, man, it'd be cool if like we did like a straight edge band. Like we should, you know, it should sound like this and like this. And if anybody knows Isaac, he's like probably the most talented musician I know. The way that Isaac can take like an idea and very, very, very quickly and efficiently turn it into like physical music is crazy. I've never seen anybody do it like him. So he would just start like kind of like noodling around like before shows, just like, you know, just playing his guitar, like, yeah, like, oh yeah, we want it to be like like really 90s and be like Buried Alive and One King Down and you know, kind of also bring in these like cool melodic aspects and a bunch of chorus pedal and yeah. So, you know, that tour ended and I can't remember what the length of time was between that tour ending and Isaac having at least like instrumentals, like rough, like scratch tracks done for a demo, but it was pretty quick. We knew we wanted Tyler singing it because like we talked about earlier, like I've known Tyler for a really long time. He's been one of my best friends for, you know, 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. We knew I've always wanted to do a band with him. Always. It just like never really lined up and it did. And then we brought Peter on, who's like, it's so the band is so like up Peter's alley. And I didn't really know Peter super well before the band. Cause I'm not from Kentucky. I moved here 7 or 8 years ago. So okay. I'm a transplant, really the only one that I like really knew, before, like, you know, I knew Isaac from like playing shows together and stuff like that. And like, I knew people from like playing a bunch of shows in Louisville. But Peter's like a full on adult with like a real life. And, I don't know if I had ever like really met Peter for real until like a couple months before the band became a thing, but like Peter rocks. We had a couple ideas for drummers and none of those panned out. Luckily, our friend Brian, who plays in like Wrist Meet Razor and stuff, was the drummer for the band for the first little while. And then, he kind of moved on to other things. And so Chris, from Harm's Way was actually one of our like original ideas for a drummer. And it just so happened to kind of like work out where like he can do that for us now. And, it's really taken the band to another level. Cause like seeing Chris play shows for so long, like Chris is in like an insane drummer. He's like, absolutely. He's like, for me, he's like top five drummers in hardcore. Easy. No question about it. So like, it's really like, I don't know. It's cool to like get to play music with people that you've always like wanted to play music with. You know, so that's kind of how the band, kind of came into existence. And then our first show was kind of like, we played the LDB pre-show in 2018.
Okay. Yeah, that checks out.
I honestly can't remember what year it was. It might've been 2017. I legitimately can't remember anymore. My brain is full of mush. But yeah, that was our first like actual show was the pre-show. And then we played like a surprise set at the fest, the next night. And it was just like, you know, kind of history. You know, we're not like a super active band. Like we all have a lot of other things going on in our lives. But like, yeah, it's great. Like, I love it. I love that I can still like have that connection with my friends. Cause you know, for a while, I didn't really know if I'd continue playing music, at least in like, you know, this arena, but, I love it. It means a lot to me. Inclination is actually the first straight edge band I've ever been into. So it's,
okay.
Yeah, never done one before. And I couldn't hand pick 4 better people to do it with.
No, yeah, that's very cool. And like, I appreciate you kind of explaining the little bit of the lore because it was Expire and Knock Loose in Europe. That was the kind of initial thing. So, yeah. So like even being literally on the opposite side of the world with a friend of yours playing in a totally different band, just to like kick around the idea and then like fast forward multiple years later, now it's all, you know, coming to be. It's very similar to how like the band that I was playing in initially started, where 3 of the original members, myself included, were at a fest in Vancouver and being like, you kind of get on that show high, especially like at a fest. You're like, man, hardcore is so sick.
When you're just like assaulted with it for like days and hours. And
Yeah, and then it was like, oh man, like I learned that my singer and my original bass player wanted to start a band, and I had been filming shows for so long and not playing music, and I was like, I need to be on the other side of this lens, and I need to be doing something, and all it took was going to an entirely different province to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so. Something that's kind of interesting. There's two pieces I want to break down there. So Inclination is like it is not just like a Kentucky straight edge band. It was like Midwest straight edge. So before Chris, because he's in like the Chicago area, I'm assuming, was you kind of being outside of that what made it like Midwest straight edge? Because it sounds like all the original members outside of yourself were all based there. So were you the catalyst to make it more broad?
Tyler just said that that's what he wanted to call the demo. And that's what it was. Because it's like Kentucky's kind of this weird thing because Louisville, in my opinion, Louisville is the Midwest. Where I live is not. Where I live somehow, even though it's only like an hour and a half away, feels a lot more like the South than Louisville does. So I don't know what Tyler's catalyst for wanting to name the record that was, but I think that people probably would have not thought it was cool if we called the demo Kentucky Straight Edge. That just for some reason that just doesn't sound nearly as cool. So I'm glad that wasn't his call.
Yeah, and if you guys were even a vegan straight edge band, like Kentucky vegan straight edge would be like an oxymoron of itself. Yeah, no, that's something I would need to ask him. It was like, was it Caleb that you wanted to make it broader because he didn't want to do that? But the second piece I want to break down was Chris joining the band. We were talking a little bit earlier about staying in the pocket with the drummer. So having a drummer switch just on a broad scale, it's like, I feel like there's kind of levels as far as like what kind of changes dynamics wise of a band. I think like a brand new vocalist is like, that is the soul of the band. So when you swap that out, there's a lot
for sure.
of,
That's a weird one for sure. Then you get into like weird Shai Hulud territory. You should right here. You should flash that Wikipedia article of all the members of Shai Hulud. It's like 30 cells long.
Yeah, it's man. I've never been in that position where it's been like a vocalist switch that happens when a band is so established. Most of the time, when I've only been in one scenario where we've switched it, where it was like right at the beginning and we had like played 2 shows with with this person and he wanted to do other things, which was totally fine. But most of the time when you're that deep into it, you're just like, oh, I think we should just start a new project. But
yeah, it's just,
I guess not for them. But yeah, so I think vocalist is at the top there, but so many guitar players and bass players are interchangeable. It's not that everyone is replaceable, but I think it's just a lot easier of like, this is the riff, this is the part, and you feel that. Drums is kind of like this little bit of an in-between slot where it is a lot of that, but there is like more style, and especially in your department with having that connection to like the bass. So when Chris joined up with you, like, was that supernatural, like just getting in with him, or was there like, oh, there's like a lot of things that were different when Prosser was playing the drums that we need to fine tune here?
It was super easy, and I remember Chris's first practice with us. He came in and like he played everything. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Exactly like it was recorded, like a machine. So it was, at least from that aspect, it was very easy. He made it very easy to just kind of go with him. And especially like he recorded the drums on new songs. And he really, like, you can tell like on the songs that he like recorded, he's to the point now where he's like very comfortable, like kind of throwing in his own style with things. But I mean, Chris has been doing it for so long, and he's such like a talented drummer, and he's also kind of in the same vein that I am. Like, he's very, very particular.
Sure.
He's very critical of himself when he doesn't do something as good as he thinks he could do it. So he always comes in, like, he came to the first practice extremely prepared, and he comes to every show extremely prepared. And he's like, yeah, he plays drums like it's his job. Because he's very, it really wasn't a transition issue at all. He's really a very good drummer, and it's very easy to kind of like get in that groove with him.
Yeah, I really like that how you said it there. It's like playing because a lot of people doing hardcore, whether you're in a super big band or a really small band, it's having fun and the passion kind of first. But there is a lot of like, this is my responsibility, this is my job, this is my role on the team of the group of guys or group of, whatever that I'm a part of. And not taking that seriously, whether you're the vocalist, bass player, drummer, it can really show. And I feel like the bands that really take it seriously, and especially when you're in like a big setting, like a fest, like someone said something to me where it's like, playing a fest is where you have your game face on, because like people are like looking up at you and kind of deciding within the first couple songs, like, is this a band that I'm going to watch, or is this a band that I'm going to skip to use the bathroom, to go get food, to go hang out with other people? So having that, to me, when I heard that, I'm trying to apply that same mindset, even if we're playing a local show, like even if we're doing that. So it's just like, so like, you can just tell that person gives a shit about their role. And if the entire band is doing that, then it's just, you're off to the races.
It's important to realize that you can do that and still have fun.
Totally.
It's finding the balance of the two, and realizing that, like, at the end of the day, like, we're all here playing loud, aggressive music, and we're not making like groundbreaking musical strides. We're all doing to varying degrees something that's already been done before.
Sure.
So you can't take the fun out of it. And if you do, it becomes, then it really does become like, just like you're going to work and your job sucks.
Yeah. I have to constantly remind myself that it's like, as much as the stresses of like doing these different things, like, take a breath and find those moments just like to be thankful and like stoked about what's happening, like before, during, and after your set. So, I think something when Isaac was on the show talking about, like, it seemed that Inclination was like, this is just going to be a local band. We're going to do these things. And then the things just really exploded. Every release, and you guys have this LP coming up, and it's like, I think that's going to be really the trajectory. But what's going back to what you're saying, like, some of the guys in this band aren't like these eager young 20-year-olds who are like, yeah, let's take on every single opportunity. It's like, we actually can't.
None of us are.
That's not our lifestyle. Like, I got other bands, I got other responsibilities. So maybe like one of the questions I had is like, what is something that maybe you didn't expect Inclination to be when, you and Isaac were first talking about it and then getting going, but you were like pleasantly surprised that it became that?
As soon as I heard the demo that Isaac wrote, I had no doubt about where it was going. As soon as I heard the demo, I was just bummed that we weren't going to be able to be a full-time band. So I didn't have any doubts about the reception that it would get. It's cool. Like, it's cool that, like, so quickly after things kind of were coming out, that we were like asked to play like cool festivals, and we've got to play This Is Hardcore, and we got to play Sound and Fury and stuff like that. So I like that. I like that we can just kind of, because we have to be, we can be picky about what we do.
Sure.
We don't, we don't need to go play Evansville, Indiana on a Wednesday night. No offense. Well, full offense, actually. I don't need to ever do that in my life.
Full offense.
So
right.
Yeah, that's fine. But no, I mean, it might sound a little conceited, but like as soon as I heard what Isaac had written, I knew where it was going to go. It wasn't a doubt in my mind.
So obviously a lot of people who know you knew that you were playing in Expire. And one thing that kind of how I look at it, and you can correct the record or say yes or no to this, to me, it felt like Expire was like, maybe it didn't become like the as big as some of the bands that are like really killing it now, but you guys like definitely like did a lot and like had a lot of, like people coming out. Like I think Expire is a reason for a lot of people getting into hardcore. So, and I'm using this term because I heard it through a colleague of mine, is like, do you think that playing in Inclination, despite it not being maybe a full-time thing, because you kind of got to scratch that with Expire, do you feel like Inclination is kind of like a what is that? Like kind of like a victory lap, so to speak? Like you did the like super busy hardcore band and now you're getting to do these crazier opportunities, but on a more like, we can choose what we want to do basic. Is that on base, or is there extra things that you want to add in there?
I guess I've never really looked at it like that. I guess for my own health and for the happiness of my wife, it's a great thing that Inclination is not like playing 250 shows a year. But not really like, there aren't really like hardcore bands that do that anymore. There aren't bands that for a full year are, 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen anymore. And I don't know how much of that like is due to COVID kind of taking control of everything for a while, but it seemed like things were kind of trending that way pre-COVID pandemic. So I guess I don't really consider it like a victory lap, because the demo came out pretty quick. I think it was pretty soon after Expire broke up. And like I was, after that band ended and before all the horrible shit happened, I sat down and kind of weighed my options where, I could have joined a different band and continued touring full time. But like my now wife and I had been dating for 3 years. I was living here in Lexington already. So I really had like a decision to make, like, is this what I want to keep on doing, or is it time to pivot and kind of shift music into more of like a hobby? Something I still really enjoy, but something that's not my job anymore. And doing music as my full-time job was like wonderful. It was awesome. But I felt like I had checked off a lot of boxes that I wanted to check off. But there's definitely boxes that like I've already checked that I want to check off with Inclination too. Like there's a couple like really cool international spots I want to hit. There's a lot of cities in the US that I would love to play. And especially like I also really want this band to be the reason that Tyler Shorten gets to like go to Japan or something like that. Like I think that seeing Tyler and like, not just like a foreign country, but like a foreign country that's like so completely different than what he's used to will be like a really entertaining experience for me. I would really, really enjoy it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know how to approach that. I guess I don't know if victory lap is the right word. But to me, they're just kind of two separate animals.
Mm.
All that stuff feels like, you know, a lifetime ago. I've done so many things since then that it's weird, not weird. It's always kind of like shocking to be like, oh, that was only like, you know, 6 years ago.
Right.
It's kind of shocking to think about that every time. So I don't know. I think that the trajectory of the band has been great, and I'm very thankful for it. And hopefully that path continues, and we keep getting opportunities to maybe check off I guess recheck a couple of those boxes and get them checked for the first time for Tyler and Peter as well.
Tyler's giddiness when I was talking to him at Promcore when Constraint was playing, his giddiness to go international, because, you know, obviously when you guys came up to play Evan Shaw's memorial show, and Tyler was like, what's the correct term to use here? Like what's like a dead weight, is putting it lightly, as far as him just like not being able to stand and being on crutches via LDB.
Dude,
so
yeah,
I'm sure that's a story of its own, that, you know, we definitely covered a lot on his podcast. But talking to him at Promcore, where he was like, dude, I've never been outside the country. And now, you know, fast forward a year later, and, you know, he's going to hit Calgary twice in 1 month.
Don't jinx it.
Sorry.
Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. We'll see if Tyler comes to Calgary this time. Right now we're 0 for 1.
Yeah. The odds are not, well, no, what the odds are in your favor, but the you know, we don't want to jinx it for sure.
They're definitely in his favor. I'm going to tell him he has to like put himself on like house arrest for like the 2 weeks before the show. He's not allowed to. Well, okay, so there's having LDB inside of a skate park was like just an accident waiting for happen to Tyler, because one, he's going to go mosh for like 95 to 99%, or no, let's just call it 100% of the bands. He's going to go mosh. And then you also put him in a place where he can skateboard. Just game over.
The risk levels are through the roof.
Yeah. If I had seen him skating, I would have like put him in timeout.
Yeah. I said 2 times, but it's actually 3. It's like, it's Wild Rose for Inclination, it's Scope 5 year for Constraint, and then Hold Your Gun Fest in Toronto for Constraint again. So, you know, he's getting all of it, all the Canada this year. And I hope all the other international stuff that he and you guys want to do. But to go back to what we were talking about, like, you know, as far as it being a victory lap, yeah, like I guess like one question, and that could be one of the, you know, before we start to segue into other things, is like, I think that every band that you play in, the good, bad, the ugly of all those experience, you take those lessons and you apply that to the next band. And I feel like, you know, whether it's showing up, like you mentioned, Chris, just being super on board, you know, I'm sure that everybody's been in a band where it's like, oh, I wish I had done that differently. And then you just apply those lessons for the other projects that you've been in. So maybe one of the last questions I could ask you on that subject is like, what do you think is like the biggest personal lesson you learned while you were in Expire that you apply to playing in Inclination?
I guess, I mean, especially towards the end of that, towards the end of that band, it really, and up until our last tour, it really did. It felt like work. And I think that's just because it just wasn't like a fun environment anymore. And like, once the call was made, like, okay, well, like, this is our last tour. It instantly felt more fun again, because there wasn't like, okay, like all, you know, we're not worried about like numbers here, like attendance at this show, or how many pre-sales there are, like anything like that. Like none of it mattered anymore. And that's kind of like, I had to like check myself and be like, this should be fun. If it's not fun, you shouldn't do it anymore. I mean, I that's another thing I could do a whole podcast is lessons I learned in that band. So yeah, I mean, it was what it was. I'm able to kind of separate now, this, X number of years later, I'm able to separate the good from the bad a lot. For the longest time, it really became this thing where like, and sometimes I still might catch myself going there. I had to go back and like look at like, hyper analyze all these situations and be like, was this actually fun, or like was something like sinister and terrible and awful going on? And like, I was just too oblivious to see it. So, and the dynamic of the band towards the end was very strange anyway. None of us were really like friends with Zach anymore, for, the last like year of the band. We would show up to a show and he would just like fuck off. And me, Josh, and Marcus would just kind of like hang out with whoever we were on tour with, and like have fun or go get food or go get coffee. So it became this thing where it's just like, it also, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that like, you should pay more attention to how your friends or acquaintances or people that you are in proximity with, how they treat people. 'Cause I'm sure there were signs. I was just too not numb or disinterested. I had just been in this environment for so long where maybe it was just like normalized. And I really did spend a lot of time like post all of that happening, like really like analyzing everything that had happened for that like 8 or 9 years, and a lot of it like, having to like cast it all in a different light. So I think like the biggest lesson I can kind of carry over is just like, just check your friends, and stuff like this is still going on. And like every day, like it comes out that some other male involved in the hardcore scene is just like being a piece of shit. And it's just this nonstop cycle. And like, I don't think I'm going to go on a little tangent here. I don't think it's enough that people like that are just like ostracized from hardcore. Like that's not good enough. 'Cause then everybody's just going to forget about it. Do I know what the proper course of action is? No, but I think that maybe if somehow there were more severe consequences, it wouldn't continue to happen, because it keeps happening over and over and over again. So I don't know. I guess just check your friends, pay attention to who you're around. Don't just speak up if you see behavior that you don't think is acceptable, regardless of what the outcome will be.
Yeah. And I think, and I appreciate you being, open and vulnerable about that, because I think anyone that's been in this space, for over, a considerable amount of time versus like, oh, I'm in hardcore for like, like being a 6-month face or whatever you want to call that. Like once you actually like understand the culture, you've made your own mark being in a band or, doing a zine, or like you're invested. You're like, I am not going anywhere. You can see those things. And sometimes I struggle with the whole, like, we don't have a defined like measuring stick when it comes to a lot of these things. It's kind of like a very black and white kind of like, this person's a great person, and then this person is being canceled for X reason. And
various things.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with you that like bands have broken up. People have like left or not wanted to do anything because they've had some kind of sinful scrutiny, for lack of a better term, that maybe wasn't justified, maybe just got taken out of proportion or out of context, or like all these different things. And I totally agree with you. I don't know what the answer is as far as like having some kind of, I don't know if it's having some kind of structure that when these things do come up, that it can be handled in a certain like borderline adult way. Cause I find a lot of these things are just so Wild West half the time. But I do think that there are a lot of moments where there's just a gut feeling of like, no, this person is like not welcome. Like, I think that was like very, very clear. I think in your situation, I've just seen too many times where it's like people give that same energy without kind of like maybe like having that measuring stick of like, is this the same? Because it's getting the same attention or it's being addressed the same way. And that's where I have a bit of a problem with it. But again, like we are not here on this podcast to like lay out what it needs to be. I think this is just two guys who are like, trying to have that conversation and hopefully, because I'm saying this all for the people who are listening who might be getting like a little like, I think that this podcast for me opens up conversations for people to think critically, and then maybe that inspires ideas of what actually needs to be in place for anything that kind of goes down. It's very messy, but I think it is super important, because I think one thing from a total outsider's perspective is like, when all this stuff was happening, like obviously like all the survivors and all of their circle of friends and families, like I was thinking about that, but I was also thinking about like all the people that I knew on like a genuine level, like not even just in Expire, but also in like, I'm thinking about like Jimmy. And I remember I did an interview. One of my very first interviews with this podcast was with Mitch when like this was right when Low End started touring, and he was still in a place of like, I'm not comfortable, like, and I wasn't forcing him, but he was like, I was trying to like, this is not something that I'm going to be forcing him to discuss. Your dog's given the
so I think somebody like breathed outside and they're not allowed to because it's his street.
But like remembering that if one band is quote unquote tossed to the garbage, there's 3 to 4 other members of that band that most of the time don't stand for those actions, but they're in these positions now where it's like, hey, maybe you're doing your band full time, and then now it's like there's a lot of reflection that I'm sure that you had done, and maybe some people just assume that you weren't like thinking critically about that. I don't know if I'm speaking for you. I don't know.
No. I understand what you're saying, but on kind of on the flip side of that, like I never wanted or expected or, I never wanted or expected anybody to know or care or believe my side of the story, because the things that were coming out were so unbelievably like horrible, like just horrifying, like just like treating another person like they are just. Sorry, he's barking again.
No, that's all good.
I'll shut the door a little bit. I didn't, I said everything I said when all that came out because I wanted to be transparent. I wanted to take a very transparent stance about where everybody else in the band stood. And I think that anybody who personally knows me now or knew me then or whatever, hopefully knew me well enough to know what my reaction would have been if I had been aware of all the things that were going on.
Right.
But I didn't just expect anybody to like believe me or take what I said at face value. And I wasn't, I never wanted anybody to feel any sort of sympathy or anything like that for myself or Josh or Marcus, because that wasn't our place. That wasn't nobody owed us that.
Right.
I think it, the people that deserved the attention and got to share what happened to them and kind of like, come in a lot of cases, come clean about something that they've been holding in for so long because they felt like no action would be taken or nobody would care. Or they were powerless to make this person accountable for what they did. I guess I can look at what happened in a positive light only in that sense that these people got to finally say something that they'd been like holding on to and had been like just eating away at them in a lot of cases. So I don't, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It feels like it was like 20 years ago, but it was like 6.
Yeah.
I hope that Zach Deer's fucking miserable somewhere. Who knows where he is?
Yeah, that I appreciate you sharing this. I wasn't going in thinking that we would even hit on Expire, and because it is that thing where it's like it's so like on the surface, it's like, ooh, I don't know if this should talk about. But
I mean,
like,
it's something that I've always tried to be very, even if it was uncomfortable, it's something that I've always tried to be very transparent about because I think that's important. I think that if somebody wanted to come up to me and just be like, hey, like, did you know like what was happening? And I would have the same honest conversation with them.
Sure.
Not in like a defensive, like it wasn't me sort of thing, but just because I feel like somebody needed to kind of take a stand and like put a public face on about it. And because and not offer an apology, but try to direct the conversation off of like, I guess direct the attention where it needed to be put. And that wasn't on any of us.
yes.
As far as like, I'm not saying like, don't like, the people that were like, oh, well, they knew. It's like everybody is perfectly entitled to that opinion. I never would argue that. And I never expected anybody to just like believe that we didn't know what was going on. So it's, I've had so many conversations with people. Cause like, for the longest time and kind of the reason that I think that band stopped being fun, was because we just kind of felt like all of the people in bands that we used to be friends with didn't like us anymore. And we didn't ever understand why. We were like, oh, well, it must be because like, we're doing these weird mixed bill tours, or like we're kind of like, I guess for lack of a better word, we kind of like turned into this like gateway hardcore band that was like easily accessible for people to kind of like dip their toe in the water, and for better or for worse, like if it got people involved in hardcore, that's cool. I think that's great. That's something that I can kind of always kind of like be happy about. But like I don't know. It's just, but it came. I've had this conversation with so many of those guys now, like all the people that we used to tour with, and like we'd see them around the country over and over again, and then eventually we would see them less and less and less and less, and we talk to them less and less and less and less. But like seeing people like that now, years later down the road, like I've had open conversations with people that are like, hey man, like sorry stuff got really weird for a while. We just all fucking hated Zach. It's like, I just wish somebody would have told me. I wish somebody would have, I mean, it's because there's, I don't know. Cause it sucks that, I don't know. And it's just, it is what it is. It's everybody involved in hardcore is like better off with like that person nowhere around it anymore.
Right.
It's yeah. So,
I think maybe one thing that I can add to kind of like broaden it, and then we can move on to some of the other topics that I have, is like, I think there's a lot of assumptions that are made when it comes to hardcore stuff, like across the board. It's like someone leaves a band and someone thinks like, oh, do you guys have beef? Or like, what the fuck is going on? It's like, hey, maybe the person like some, like didn't want to. Yeah, it's like, and most times it's like the band I play in now, it's like we've had a lot of member changes only because the band got bigger, and that kind of like certain people in the band are like, oh shit, I actually can't do that, or I have a thing that I have to do. And so people make assumptions about that. People make assumptions about how a record's going to sound and like, oh, it has singing. It's going in this direction. It's like, it's just one track with singing. Like, let's calm down, everyone. So I think like allowing people to say, like, speak their, not their side, but just like allowing to listen first versus just like emotionally respond to something a lot of the time is just something I try to say for people, because I sometimes I just see things get so off the rails, and I think a lot of people forget that like there's this like 4 dudes or 5 dudes in a band that are at the end of the day just making art, and people rush to like drag through the mud, try to grab something and get a little bit of like, you know, attention off of that. So yeah, maybe like the overarching thing is like, don't assume and allow for like the uncomfortable conversations if it's at those stakes, you know? Like, and I commend you for like, even so many years later, it's not like I talked about this, I put out the tweet, you know, whatever. Like it's something that, you know, you clearly like, you're talking about it because you care about not like how you make yourself look, but just like getting it. So it's like, hey, like, I don't want a shadow of a doubt. I want it to just be always like crystal clear. And if that's a touch point back to it, you know, I feel like if someone's rushing up to you at an Inclination show in 2022 and asking you about that, it's like you could do a little bit of homework at the very least. But yeah.
I mean, I've had people come up like after shows and like, oh man, like I love Expire. I'm just like, okay, all right. So yeah, it's always I just don't say that too loud. But it, you know, it's something that I'll always, I'll always be very open about it and kind of, you know, take whatever criticism needs to be had because of it, because somebody's got to do it. He tucked tail and ran.
Okay. Total topic change. Because we've,
let's do it.
You know, you're into cycling, heavily into cycling, it seems. Yes. Just the nod. So
sorry, I thought there was more to that statement. I didn't know if there was.
No, I was just like, oh yeah, but so has that always been something like? Did that come like very early in life, or has that been like kind of a more recent? Like, I feel like everyone's picked up all these new passions and hobbies since the pandemic. They're like, I have all this free time, I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to do this. So where in the timeline was like, I want to be on 2 wheels? And are you like a mountain cyclist, or are you like urban, like you're in the streets, like, or you do both? I'm not sure. Break down that whole thing for me.
Yeah, so it's actually been a hobby of mine for quite a while. So when I first moved to Columbia, Missouri, let's see, I saw somebody riding a really cool bike. This was probably 2007 or 2008, and I was like, you know what? I like bikes. I think I'm gonna get into cycling. And when I get into something, I get really into it, and I have to you know, I have to do things myself. I'm like learn myself and do a bunch of research and stuff like that. So I put together, I ordered a bunch of parts, and I built up like my first bike was just like fixed gear bicycle that every you know, back then everybody was riding fixed gear bikes. And me kind of you know, I lived pretty close to a bike shop. And I would always like go there and like ask them questions, and like if I needed something installed that I couldn't do on my own, like they would help me out, stuff like that. And eventually I started working there as a mechanic. So that was kind of my into like real, like I guess like real bikes, if that's like actually cycling.
Right.
Cause I, you know, this, you know, working there, I'd get like a discount on things. I could afford nicer stuff at, you know, my poor amount of money I had to my name.
What was your discount?
So that's, it's pretty good. I think on most things it was was like 40%. Basically, it was
crazy.
It was very good. I had way more valuable bikes than I should have had. So I got I started mountain biking. I started doing cyclocross. I never really was like a road guy. Has never really been like a big road cycling guy. So I moved when I moved away from Columbia, I kind of like didn't do it as much anymore. Like I had less and less free time. I worked at a bike shop when I first moved to Milwaukee. But then like touring full time happened. I would go mountain biking stuff in my free time. And then when I moved here to Lexington, it's just always kind of been something that I've enjoyed doing. It's something I like tinkering. I like fixing things, and I like riding a bike. I like being outside. So mainly here, I do a lot of like gravel riding, and a lot of I went mountain biking this morning with my father-in-law. So yeah, it's been a thing for a while. Like you mentioned, over the pandemic, like I did have quite a few friends that like decided they want to get into cycling for the first time. Like Isaac bought a bike all based off suggestions I made him, and like I put it together for him and stuff like that. Like my friend Dave, who sings in Weapon X, kind of like also decided he wanted to do it. And like, you know, Dave and Isaac and I go ride sometimes whenever I go up to Louisville. Dave's come down here a couple times, but yeah, it's great. It's a great hobby. Kind of an expensive hobby if you really get into it. So yeah, it's just kind of always been something I've done. I'm excited to get to ride more because I'll have a lot more free time. I'm actually in my last semester of undergrad at the University of Kentucky for mechanical engineering. So I'm 2 weeks away from graduating. So then I'll only have to work full time instead of work and school full time.
Dude, I can't imagine how you do that. Yeah, and I totally forget the when someone sometimes I totally forget that like when someone like, oh, like my bike was stolen and it's like a custom bike. I'm like how much how well, I don't know if you want to disclose how much one of your bikes is worth, but how much could have how do I ask this without putting you on blast for how expensive your bike is? Or do you have that like under lock and key?
I mean, if somebody were to break into my garage right now, I'd be out a lot of money.
Okay,
five figures.
Okay, damn. And
don't tell anybody my address.
I don't know your address. How many bikes is that over? Is like I doubt you have one 5-figure.
Well,
bike.
there's two that are like really, really nice, and then two that are just kind of worth maybe a couple $100 a piece.
Got you. Okay, so it's like you got two nice machines, and then like, you know, sprinkle in a couple of just whatever fixer uppers. Today was actually the inaugural ride on my new mountain bike that my wife bought me as a graduation present because she's the absolute best. So that was a really, really good time, and she rocks. How much of the difference do you see between the two main bikes that you have? Is there, because I have this stress, like I'm not a car person. I hate taking things apart and putting it back together because I don't trust myself that like I'm not going to put in that one screw and then it's just my wheel's going to go off, or like, you know,
right.
That is just not me as a person. Like I'm way more like I trust fully for other people to do that. But do you feel that difference when you're going between these two bikes, or is it too early to tell based off you just giving it?
Oh, they're two very different things. Like my mountain bike is a mountain bike. It's not really comfortable to do any other sort of riding on.
Sure.
And my other like main bicycle is kind of a mix between it's mainly meant for just like gravel riding. Like it looks like a road bike but has much thicker tires on it.
Okay.
They, you know, it's one's got like one's got drop bars, the other one's just straight mountain bike handlebars. So they're very different feels for very different things. But I like to tinker, and I fix whatever I can fix on my own. I fix on my own. I enjoy learning how to do stuff like that.
Sorry, I'm getting a beep. What the fuck is going on? No.
I can't hear it at all.
No, it's on my end. It's like someone's trying to FaceTime me right now. Sorry. Oh. It's my wife calling on Facebook, and I forgot I had the tab open. Jordan, can you mark that for me?
On Facebook.
Yeah, she's doing an audio call. Oh, she's off closer to 5. Okay, I will. Okay, let me close this Facebook tab now. I was like, where's this coming from? Okay. So maybe one of the final questions that I can ask on the actual bike side of things, because I've always wanted to have my own bike, but I feel like the custom side of all that seems very daunting to me. It's like, okay, like where do I start? Like, so if there was like one piece of advice that you would give to me or anyone else listening who's like, I want to spend a decent chunk of money on a good bike. What do I need? What is like the most important question I need to ask? What is like the most important piece of the entire pie that I need to like not cheap out on? What are your thoughts?
I think really the most important question is just kind of what kind of riding do you want to do? And really it's, and that can vary by where you live, things like that. So I would recommend just going and talking to somebody at like your local bike shop, telling them the kind of riding you want to do, how much money your budget is, and they'll get you set up in the right direction. And I always encourage people to buy from their local bike shop as opposed to like online retailers or things like that, because usually like a new bike from your local bike shop will have like some sort of service package with it. If something goes wrong, you know exactly who to call. And that's an important relationship to develop, especially with something that you're spending, a substantial amount of money on.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. I think this conversation has inspired me that maybe 2022 is the year that Spicy gets its own bike, because it's finally like getting into summertime here in Canada. So, we try to relish in that as much as we can before the snow comes back around.
Enjoy it while you can for your 3 months a year.
Yeah. Caleb, this has been a great conversation. The very last question that I ask every single guest who comes on is to share a favorite Mosh related story. And that could be something that you did, something that happened to you, happened in a band that you were playing in, just happened at a show that you were just attending and watching. Whatever is fresh to your mind is how we start to wrap up.
I think it's so cringy to talk about moshing, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I have two good ones. So okay. The first time that we ever went to Europe, we went with Foundation. I think it was 2000 and I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know years anymore. Whatever year it was, that was our first time in Europe. And I love that band. And I had never been to Europe before. I didn't know what the hardcore scene was like over there. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew that I was going to mosh to Foundation every night. And they mosh in Europe. They don't really hit each other. It's not really like they always like stop like just short of like clocking somebody.
Sure.
So I think we were somewhere in Germany, and I think Foundation was playing Fireproof, and I'm like up front singing along, and I start moshing, and I completely forget. I'm like, okay, like you need to take it easy, like you don't want to hurt somebody, like this people aren't used to what you're gonna do, like be respectful, and I just like blacked out, and I accidentally like came around and I hit this guy so hard that he ended up laying on the stage, like at like the guitar player's feet. And I felt so bad. And I don't think I moshed for the rest of that tour, even though I really wanted to. Another time,
he was laying unconscious like this.
I don't know if he was fully unconscious, but he wasn't having a very good time.
He got the wind out of his sails.
Yeah, because I hit him in the I hit him in the chest. So and it just it put him up and onto the stage, like, because he was just standing, and the stage was probably like not chest height, but somewhere between like chest and belly button.
Sure.
One more, and this is a fun one that Tyler likes to tell too. Let's see. We were on tour with Another Mistake, and we were playing Birmingham, Alabama, and I think there was a band from Texas called Vulgar Display. They were also on the tour, and Vulgar Display was playing, and Tyler was moshing, as he does, and there was like a local guy at the show who, like, you could tell, like, this is my show, like, this is my scene, like, blah, blah, blah. He was getting so mad about Tyler moshing, and Tyler, like, I don't think Tyler hit it, but I think Tyler got like a little bit too close to the guy. And so the guy comes up behind Tyler and literally, like, puts him in like a choke and picks him up off the ground. And then sees all the people from the tour looking at him and knowing he just did a really bad thing. And I also don't remember this, and Tyler swears it's exactly what happened. But Tyler says I put the guy on the wall and kind of held him up there and just kind of like waited to see what he was going to do. And his girlfriend came up, like, freaking out, like, yelling at me. And I felt really bad, but like I protect Tyler Short at all costs. So it's just kind of, it is what it is. But I'm too old. I'm too old to mosh. I'll hurt myself now. I can't. I'll hyperextend my elbow every time, or get kicked in the shins, or do something really stupid. So yeah. I'm a much less active participant now. I leave that to the Tyler Shorts of the world.
Yeah. I just love the visual of
that same tour. I did accidentally kick Tyler directly in the chest, like full on, like he was going that way, I was going this way, and just put my foot directly but on his sternum. He wasn't very happy with me.
I feel like your kill shot is people's chest. It sounds like, it's not breaking. I don't mean to.
I don't know.
Yeah. So, next time you see Caleb mosh spontaneously, because it's like some band doing a cover, just, cover your chest.
No, it's not going to happen.
This has been a super, super fun conversation. Really excited to see you for, the inclination sets for Wild Rose. And I'm sure there's going to be other potential opportunities of running into you. All your links and all the band links and all that good stuff will be in the show notes. But if there's anything you want to shout out, plug, or send the people off with before we wrap up, the floor is yours.
Oh, man. Let's see. It's probably already been beat to a dead horse by the people that have come on the podcast, but I still, I can't believe how good that Foreign Hands EP is. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I'll plug it every chance I get. I don't know if I really have anything else. Louisville hardcore is in a really cool spot right now. There's tons of good bands coming out. Might be a little Louisville hardcore surprise on Wild Rose. So, be there, be square. I'm not going to say anything else about it. I'll probably get yelled at for saying something about it now, but it is what it is.
Yeah, Caleb, really a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, very excited to see you rock. As this episode wraps up, I'll be playing that Inclination track off the LDB comp. I don't know if I'm gonna. When I was asking Tyler, I'm like, "What should I say about the comp?" He's like, "Oh, it's coming up at some point." I was like, "There's no PR write up of."
It's very up in the air. Especially with like pressing plant delays and things like that.
Totally.
And also, like, Tyler Short being who he is, everything is very off the cuff, spur of the moment. Like, the guy has so much going on all at the same time. So Yeah, it's a compilation of Louisville hardcore bands. Some of the tracks are original songs, some of the tracks are covers. Ours is a cover by a mid '90s Louisville band called By the Grace of God.
Okay.
The track is called November's Lie. It's about how the American political system is a dumpster fire.
Couldn't have said it better myself. For those that have
that's kind
of tuned in for the full episode, that will roll as soon as we're wrapped up here. Caleb, pleasure was all mine, friend, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Wait, do you want to meet my dogs?
Yes.
On us all, but your hands can't touch us.